My true story happened in the fall of 2001 when I was living in a beautiful old Victorian home with my 4-year-old daughter. The house is located in Buckinghamshire in the UK, where it still stands to this day. One day, I was alone in the house as my daughter was spending the day with her grandmother. Suddenly, I heard the sound of the back door opening. Surprised and feeling a little bit irritated because the person didn't knock before entering my house, I shouted out, "Just a minute, I'll be right there." I peeked into the kitchen from where I was standing in the washroom. What I saw next will forever remain etched in my memory. Standing at the back door, I saw a half figure of a white man who was barefoot and wearing a red bathing suit. He was only visible from the waist down and he was soaking wet. As he walked across the room, I could hear the sounds of his wet feet squeaking on the kitchen floor and the sound of the water dripping off of him. Stunned, I stared slack-jawed as my mind tried to grasp what I was actually seeing. He walked to the opposite end of the kitchen and stopped for a moment in front of my cupboards. Then he turned to face me. I could see the bottom half of him clearly, but I could also see the cupboards through him. Shocked and rooted to the spot, I said out loud, "Oh my God, you're a ghost." He turned away and continued to walk down the hallway that led to my living room. Squeak, squeak, squeak. I just stood there in disbelief and watched him walk about halfway down the corridor before he disappeared into thin air without leaving a trace. Or did he? Completely freaked out, I ran through every room in the house looking for the half figure that I had just seen, but it was nowhere to be found. Questioning my own sanity at this point, I searched for water on my kitchen floor. Surely it must be wet, before I checked the lock on the back door. The kitchen floor was bone dry and the door was securely locked with a deadbolt. Needless to say, I packed up all of our worldly belongings and moved out of that house a few days later. One evening I came home late from work. I put my handbag down on the kitchen table and started rooting through it. I realised I didn't have my mobile phone with me and I couldn't remember the last time I had seen it. I must have lost it on the way home. I went into the hallway and picked up my landline phone and dialed the number. The phone rang for a long time and then someone eventually picked it up, but they didn't say anything. I said hello, but there was no answer. But I could hear breathing down the other end, so I said hello again. "Can you hear me?" There was still no answer, but the breathing got a little bit heavier. I said for the final time, "Hello, can you hear me?" Then, in a low voice, a person on the other end said, "Yes, I hear you." Then they hung up. After that, I kept trying to call the mobile, but nobody would pick it up. Eventually, I gave up in frustration. It was late and I decided to go to bed. When I went upstairs to my bedroom, I had the shock of my life to see my mobile phone sitting there on the nightstand. It was on silent. Bear in mind, this was late 2009 and I was only about 10 at the time. Me, my mother and my stepdad lived in a small town in Sweden in a big house. If you went upstairs you could still hear talking down at the kitchen, so it was that isolated. One evening when I was home alone because my mum and stepdad was going to my grandma's house and I asked them if I could stay at home because as a typical 10-year-old I thought I was too grown up for a babysitter. After about an hour of nagging, she gave up and told me I could stay at home alone, only if I kept the doors locked and never opened it to anyone. It was really exciting for me and I stayed up really late watching cartoons. If I remember correctly, it was SpongeBob and SquarePants in our living room and eating ice cream. After about 5 minutes eating this delicious ice cream, I was sure I heard a silent knock on the door. I didn't think much of it and continued watching the show. After 5 minutes passed, I could hear more knocking again, but this time it was much louder. I was frozen in fear and waited for the knocking to stop. After about 30 seconds, the knocking stopped. Then I called my mum and she said that she'll be home in 20 minutes and she told me to go into my room and lock the door. I went into my room without turning the TV off, so it was pretty loud. I sat in my room really scared, and after about 2 minutes I heard somebody not knocking, but literally banging the door down. I was frozen in fear once again. After about 3 minutes I could hear the door lock turn and somebody walking in. The person was inside my house while I was at home alone. I sat there in my room quiet, and then the TV turned off. The footsteps were louder and I felt like it was coming towards my room. After a couple of seconds the steps stopped and I could hear knocking on my bedroom door, and an old man said, "Let me in, I have something for you." I started screaming and crying for my mum, and the man started shaking the door handle quite viciously. After 2 minutes I heard a car outside, so I looked out the window. It was my mum. I opened the window and screamed for help and said that there's a man trying to get into my room. My stepdad quickly ran to the shed to get his axe and ran up the stairs. The man quickly ran out of the back door and my stepdad ran after him into the streets. My mum called the police and my stepdad calmed me down when he got in. This is an experience I will never forget.